Hello, everybody. This is the Fashion Photography Podcast, and it's a weird edition because this time we're not on our website. The Fashion Photography Podcast is this time on YouTube. So, if you want to listen to all of our previous episodes with so many different and amazing artists, all you have to do is to click the About section and you go to our website, which is the Fashion Photography Podcast. You can see it over here. And there you'll see many different options. You can listen to the podcast. You can see who the guests are. Here in the guest page, you can see who is providing you with this podcast. And this is me and the producer of the podcast, George. And you can also donate in case you feel like you're generous or if you just want to support the podcast. So, guys, I'm very happy to tell you that this series started as something for the quarantine. However, you guys seem interested. So I just want to share with you now that you can share this episode, what you're seeing right now, with all of your photography lovers, because the more, the better, right? And I cannot wait to introduce you to our first, not just first, but only guest, by the way, today. My mistake. She's absolutely amazing. But in the meantime, while we are taking a look at her and while she's telling us a little bit about her, I would love to know a little bit about you. So tell me in the comments, where are you based? And let's welcome our gorgeous guest. Hello, Anita.
Good morning, good afternoon, good
Good afternoon.
evening,
Yeah.
wherever you are in the world. Sorry, I just noticed my bed in there.
Well, we're all at home, so that's totally normal. My bed is also almost in the picture, so don't
Yeah,
worry.
that's okay.
Tell us
How
a
are you
little bit
doing today?
more about you. We're doing great. All we wanted to see today was you. So I really would love to know a bit more about you. And in the meantime, I just want to say, are you amazed that nowadays everyone is a YouTuber?
I mean, I guess not really. It's like I know it's a very lucrative business and it's a very lucrative market to be in. Everybody wants to work for themselves and be their own boss. So I absolutely understand that. It's understandable for me. It's the same way, everybody wants to be an Instagram model or an Instagram influencer because it is a great job to have. You get lots of stuff for free, you get to travel. Well, not anymore, but when it's possible, you get to travel, you get to go places. So it's definitely something that's very, lucrative for a lot of people. I personally am based in Bali most of the time or outside of the pandemic. Right now, I'm in Ireland where my parents are. So I'm staying at my parents' place for now. And I mostly do swimwear and sometimes fashion, sometimes a little bit of beauty, depending. Um, and I'm also a YouTuber. I do photography education on YouTube. I show people behind the scenes from my shoots. I do different types of um, camera reviews, gear reviews, but mostly like behind the scenes and just teaching people about photography.
That's awesome. So, I think the best part about you being a YouTuber and having this huge following is the fact that you're sharing so much of your knowledge with everyone. So, I can see that in the comments, we've got people from Baltimore, from Atlanta, from Miami, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Germany, and they're all
Yeah.
able to just learn from you, which I find so amazing and so nice. But today we're gonna dive deeper into a certain topic. We're gonna talk more about posing, and I know
Yeah.
that many people have problems with the posing their models.
Hmm.
So guys, tell us in the comments whether you find it difficult and what do you think is the most difficult part about posing a model. So, Anita, can you tell us? We've got already a podcast with you, and people can listen to it on our website. But please, for those of you that are new to the podcast, new to the channel here, can you share with us for how long you've been doing that? And tell me about the beginning. Was it really hard for you to pose your models?
Yeah, for sure. So I started photography. I think I got my first camera when I was around 16. So I've been doing it for like around 12 years now. I didn't start with model photography because I am like my parents are based in Cork, which is a very small city here. We don't really have a lot of models in general. Definitely not the models that you see on my website. So, um, so yeah, so it was definitely a tricky situation because I didn't really have a lot to go off on. So I would take photos of anything I could. I actually took quite a lot of self portraits as well, which is pretty interesting because I don't really enjoy being in front of the camera that much. I was actually taking self portraits this morning, which is kind of interesting. It's like it's made its full circle now. But yeah, I started that and I started taking photos of myself first because I did know that I wanted to take photos of models in general. I didn't want to take photos of like, you know, landscapes and stuff like that. I did, and I didn't find it very exciting. So at the beginning, I would just find girls who are literally just my friends, and I would be like, hey, you look nice. Can I take photos of you? And the photos weren't very good in general. They were fine. But they were very simple. My style was more like a portrait photographer. So I was very like, blurred background, shooting a 1.4, all this kind of stuff. So it was very basic. And then eventually I started going to Dublin. It's a bigger city here in Ireland. And I was able to get more models and so on. But yeah, at the beginning it was super challenging to post models. And it was actually challenging for years. It wasn't something where I was like, yeah, okay. Even when I was like on a professional grade where I was like in the studios doing shoots, I would still find it really stressful because I am an introvert by nature. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I think it's just the YouTube that brought it with, brought out. What, sorry, I'm just like,
Don't worry.
I'm stuck for words. Yeah, so I think, in general, I'm very shy. I wouldn't be a very outspoken person on set, and especially because, I was relatively very young when I was starting to do it because I was like 18, 19, 20, 22. And, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. So I always thought that, when I was working with models, whoever I can get should know how to pose. And that is true, of course. When you have professional models, they should have some sort of an idea of how to pose. But at the same time, you do have to give them some sort of a direction, at least, where you're like, okay, yeah, that's great, that's good, keep doing that. Or no, don't do that, do something else. Because, at the end of the day, I think the girls obviously can't see themselves through your eyes. You see how they look in front of you very well, but they can't. So they're just standing there and just doing their poses, and it's just like, what's happening. So that's one of the things. And then, as I said, I started my YouTube channel and I started, doing the videos for people, and that made me much more comfortable in terms of speaking out instead of in terms of talking about what's happening on the set. I would just chat to people through my entire process and so on, and it obviously helped a lot because I would explain step by step what I was doing, and in that process, I got way more comfortable in directing models because it was just part of that process, because I was speaking everything out loud, and I was like, now I'm doing this. Now I'm going to be doing this, and this is why I'm doing it. It was just kind of a part of the kind of like a next step. And obviously, another thing is because I've done so many photo shoots and I see what works better than other things. It's just easier to pose models as well because I just have certain ideas of where I'm like, okay, like maybe if I pose her this way, it's gonna look good, and you kind of build like a almost like a catalog of poses in your head and on your computer a lot of the time because I noticed that I have a lot of poses in my photos, even in the ones that I tend to go for, that are somehow similar, girls looking away from the camera, and like certain poses for swimwear and certain poses for fashion that repeat themselves as I go. So it's just automatically I'm just drawn to that, and because I know it already, I keep going back to it.
I think this is a very tricky part actually, because, for example, especially if you're in a smaller city, or if you're, well, that was my parrot. He's as usual, just as involved.
Okay. That's
So
fine.
what I see is that usually people are, whenever you're shooting something, when you get used to the fact that you have particular models and so on and so on, and if you're in the beginning of this process, you're most likely shooting some new faces. And when
Hmm.
you do that, they don't really know how to pose. Like
Hmm.
they could have gone to a course or two, but they're not particularly good at this.
Yeah.
So if you're posing them all the time, I think you can easily get to the point where you've got all the same images with just
Yeah.
different faces, which I
Hmm.
think is very tricky and a huge problem. So I have a weird advice on that topic, but I was wondering, what would be your advice? If you want me, I can start because it's a weird question, and I know that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, go
So
for it.
I think
I will
the
I will sorry, I'll actually just grab my phone and I'll just post a little story about us being live. So while you
oh, of
explain,
course, go
I'll be
ahead.
taking a
So
photo.
in my opinion, the most important part is to shoot as much as you can and try to do the best work possible,
Hmm.
because if you do that, you're easily going to get the chance to work with better models, which
Yeah.
means that they'll be more experienced. And I think this is so very important. And also, another thing that you can do in a situation like that is to talk to your models and educate them. Because if you educate them, for example, if they're new faces, many times they have no idea what to do with their face, with their hands, and so on. So you can easily tell them, just for the next time, open Pinterest, let's say, and type down whatever you want with
Hmm.
fashion or with editorial at the end, and look at the poses. Sometimes people forget to say simple things like that, and we should not forget the fact that models are usually very young. So a
Yes.
tip like this can really change the game for both them, but you too.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of models, especially, it doesn't matter if they are beginning or not, they are as kind of as scared of being in front of the camera as you are of directing them.
Definitely.
So it definitely goes both ways. And a lot of the time it's also about putting your model at ease and just kind of explaining to her, or just kind of directing her through the process, because it can be very tricky when you're just starting out, and a lot of the time it will be a girl's first shoot and so on. So you want to make sure that she has that guidance throughout it. And what I found super helpful, especially at the beginning, was to have a mood board with images. So for example, show them visually, kind of, this is the photo on my phone and this is what you can do. And it's great because it gives them a strong like visual idea of what you want. And other thing that I would also do as well is I would just show them the pose myself. So I would
Yeah.
just sit in a certain way or stand in a certain way and be like, hey, why won't you do this? And then they can recreate it much easier rather than me just trying to explain it with words. Because I
Yeah.
find whenever I explain something with words, girls always get confused, and and they're like, what? What do you
Especially
mean
if
I
you're
just
not,
sit and yeah? So
yeah,
I just
if
do
you're
it. I
not
just
good
go
with
there and
left
do
and
it.
right.
It's so much easier. Oh my
Yeah.
God, yes. No, I agree. Okay,
Well,
where
I think this tip with the little images that you can always show them is a great one, because for
Mhm.
example, I what I do for big photo shoots when I know that there is a lot of photos that I have to finish until the end of the day. We've got several
Mhm.
models, for example, and I know it's going to be an exhausting day. The client is there. I've got to move fast. I've got to think
Yes.
fast. So what I would do in a situation like this is to just print all kinds of poses.
Yeah.
So I
Mhm.
roughly try to make sure what kind of photographs I need to take. Like, for example, if I need a lot of full body shots or just close ups, and just try and collect as many photos as I can with poses in this particular crop,
Yeah.
so that I can show them always. And sometimes when the photo shoot is way too hectic, what I would do is to just shove all of these images into my stylus hands and be like, you know what the clothes are, so just put those images according to the looks. So
Yeah.
she does that. She's just putting them on the hanger, so the model is very aware what to do. And
Yes.
yeah, this tip was absolutely amazing. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay, so guys, I was wondering, what is the most difficult part for you to pose? So is it when you're shooting, for example, a close up? Is it the face? Because I know it's kind of weird to say to pose the face, but in my personal opinion, if there is no emotion in the face,
It's very
you
hard.
right?
Mm.
You
Yeah,
cannot
and
do anything.
I find for sure, and especially if you're shooting any sort of close-ups or beauty, and you have to, I've had whole editorials for beauty where the girl literally wouldn't change her face, and it's so difficult because you have to have, depending on like where you crop, you have to have some sort of emotion, and it's definitely challenging for me personally. I think when I was starting out, I had no problem with close-ups because, as I said, I was kind of more a portrait photographer at the beginning. I did struggle so much with shooting full body. And I find for the very first few years of my life, I wouldn't even shoot anything more than like half bodies because I would feel very overwhelmed with full bodies. I didn't know what angles to take, what kind of angles to use and what kind of ways to pose the body, which kind of ways should I go in terms of my camera. Should I go lower down? Should I go higher up? Because obviously it all depends. If you shoot lower down, the model is going to look taller. If you shoot from above her, she's going to look shorter. So it's all those kind of things that you don't really know when you're starting out. And obviously when I was starting, there wasn't really such a thing as YouTube and photography, or there was YouTube, but there wasn't like photography on YouTube and posing tips and anything like that. So it was definitely a much harder process, and it was definitely more stressful as well. But yeah, full body. Oh my God, I hated full bodies. And now I mostly shoot full bodies. I barely actually shoot like, close-ups. So it's so funny how it all, kind of
Which means
again made the full circle. Yeah.
you're just getting better. So
Yeah.
practice is the key. Okay, people are saying that hands are the most difficult part of it.
Mm,
I was wondering maybe we can start with some photos and we can
sure.
discuss the difficulties about the
Yeah.
hands and the poses. So
Yeah.
I think this would be great. Are you going to share your screen?
Sure. Do you want me to show some of my photos?
Of course, only your
Okay.
photos. That's it for
You're like
today.
nobody else.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to share my how about posing hands? Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Oh, that
Okay,
was
so this is
you were so
yeah.
fast.
So as you guys see, with like I tend to have a lot of poses where my models have hands in the air, and I noticed this is just something that it's just like either resting their hands for like full body poses or sitting poses. So like this one here, you can see Elena's resting on her hand here. With Laura, it's the same kind of thing. She's playing with her hair. Here another one just resting against her head. So I don't even realize when I do it, but I do tend to have them in certain positions like that, holding their hands up again, again, another one holding the hand up. So when you start looking at my portfolio together, you see a lot of similar poses. We have one here where she's holding her boob with one hand. That's a
Yeah.
pro tip. Just get your model to hold her boob. No,
How
but
do
like
you
I have
say
a lot
that?
of
How do you
yeah,
say that?
just like
Are you like, hey,
excuse me, would you mind just holding your breast for a second?
not weird at all? I think if
Um,
a guy, maybe if a guy say that something like this, it's gonna be a little bit
yeah.
more awkward.
So okay, so like it depends because it's like for full body shots, hands are not as important. I think it's just obviously well they are, but what I always try and do is I always try to keep my body or the model's body's angled. So if you see here for this pose that I have, her arms are angled here and her leg is angled. So it just creates a bit more of an interesting perspective in terms of photography. Same here. She has her arms bent or her yeah, there are her
Wait,
arms.
yeah,
Yeah,
her waist. I love this because creating different shapes, I think it's so
yeah,
important for your photos because
yeah.
the environment can be super boring. Your model might
Mhm.
not have any type of face, anything in particular. However,
Yeah,
if you do have some sort of structure and
yeah.
yeah, I think it's just different.
So as you see with most of my photos, there's some sort of an angle in the body. It's either in the legs, as you see here. There's another one in the legs here. So if there's like straight arms, let's say like in this one, there's going to be a bent leg. So it's somewhere where she's not just standing straight. And I have to say, this is pretty advanced for me. When I started out, my posing was very, very simple. And it's only now that I've been starting to kind of play around with having all those different shapes because I think it just makes the photo so much more interesting and it draws your eye in much more. So whenever you see, you never see my model standing just straight, like they have their hands up, like here with Deja, or they're playing with it. Another thing is like playing, if you don't know what to do with the hands and you have a model wearing a nice dress, get her to wave the dress around if she can, because that helps a lot. Like that helped me kind of spice up my style, or no, sorry, not my styling, my posing a lot. Just getting models to move and just kind of twist around with the dresses, work with the garments. Sorry, what am I doing?
And
I
this
lost
is
my,
also, don't worry, this is also a
there we go.
great tip when we talk about fashion photography because you can simply show what this clothing is capable of. Because
Yes.
sometimes, yeah, especially when we talk about dresses and things like that,
Hmm.
women that are usually buying things like that, they're calling by the phone and they're like, hey, is it, can this move? I need this for
Hmm.
this and this. So I think with a photo like that, you can easily show what this clothes
Yeah.
is capable of.
Yeah, so like for this one, this shoot was great because the styling on this one was so flowy. They had loads of kind of flowy pieces like this, so it was really nice. But even if, if I'm shooting in a bikini like this one,
Mhm.
again, so many, angles. You have the angle with one arm, angle with the other. And as you see, I have a lot of the models doing, like, holding their hands in the air and so on, because it does help. It breaks up the shot somehow. And as I said, it's so funny. I didn't even know I was doing it. And now that I actually properly I'm looking, my models never have their hands just down. I always do. Even when I pose myself, this is a self-portrait. Look, I have the angles as well. I have
Oh,
angles
let
in
me
my leg.
show it. Yes.
I have angles in my leg and angles in my arm as well. So there was just like that was a video that I was actually doing about posing. You can find it on my YouTube channel. Um,
When we talk about angles, I think it's also very important to say that you should also be very aware about the level of your camera because
oh
sometimes
yeah.
angle can be so tricky.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. Like if
if
you're
you,
shooting higher up or lower down, it's like
for
I actually did
example, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I did this really funny video this morning because I was taking photos of myself, and I just took this photo of like me going from like the very bottom holding the camera, and I'm just like super double chin and stuff, and then just like going up, how the angles matter. And it's pretty funny because I've seen a few videos like that, and it's just like you can really make someone look completely different based on the angle of your camera. And if you're really low on the ground, as I said, you will make the model look longer, but also you'll distort her a bit more. Her head is going to look smaller and her legs are going to look bigger. If you shoot from above her, she will look like a tiny person. And it's just, there's so many ways you can go about angles. So you definitely have to kind of know how to approach it.
That's why it's so important to never make your photographer mad, right? Because if you're having arguments with them, you can really look very, very bad. But that's not the case with your photos. However, we were talking about angles and the position of your camera. And why I said this is the fact that if you, because I don't really enjoy being photographed too. So
Mhm.
if, for example, you were telling me, hey, Virginia, put your hand like this,
Mhm.
we should be, I think, as a photographer, you should be very careful with your angle. Like your camera is not supposed to be where mine is right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
Am I
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. No, oh, no, of course. Like, if you have, even if you look at here, right? If I put my hand in front of the camera, like, look how huge my hand looks in
Yeah.
comparison to the rest of my body. It looks ginormous. So it's the same with anything else. If you put anything, like, you see when I do this, how huge my hands are. My hands are not this big, and my head is not this small. But it's all about the angles. Like, if I come closer to the camera and I have my hands just somewhere there, they're going to be tiny. So it's like it's the same thing. It's just that's why when I'm shooting with models and I usually make sure that their legs are as much towards the camera, or at least one leg is as much towards the camera as possible. And I usually get them to point their toes as well because it just elongates the whole leg. And obviously, then it kind of leans in towards the rest of the body and towards the head. And, if the head looks a bit smaller than the rest of the body, it's usually fine because that's how it is anyway. But if I went the other way around and I took a photo where the head was really close and the legs were really far away, it would just look ridiculous. So,
But you can also do the opposite, right? If the hand, for example, is way too too much towards the camera, you can have this kind of thing where it looks like my hand is
do you have no,
starting
yeah,
from
it's
here. Yeah.
I find like it's especially tricky with knees because sometimes
Yeah.
when the
That
knees are
explains
straight
why
on,
mine
you can't see and it just looks like your legs are really yeah. So you have to make sure that they are like slightly. But I think in general, in terms of sitting poses, I do love a good spread. I know it sounds wrong, but it is kind of good when the model is sitting with her legs spread a tiny bit because it's just it creates again kind of nice angle because they come out kind of like this. So you have the nice angle here and
yeah,
the nice angle here. So
always.
I
And
think this.
My personal advice to be to not mirror both of the legs or the arms to make
Yeah,
sure
no,
that
one should be a bit longer than the other for sure. They shouldn't be like equally open. There should be like maybe something like this, for example,
with a
or
tiny bit of different position. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we've got a question from the audience. Who's usually choosing the models? Are they all agency signed? So these are two different questions.
So what do you mean who's usually choosing the models? But
Is
I
this
mean,
you,
for
or if you're working with a client, is it the client?
it depends. I mean, obviously, if it's a client and if it's a paid shoot, then it's usually the client. A lot of the time, however, they will ask me for recommendations. So a lot of the time, it's kind of like a joint decision where I give them my opinion and then they choose on the models
They do whatever
accordingly.
they want.
Well, yes, basically. Some clients actually prefer for you to choose the model because they don't want to be, or they want you to at least suggest, and then they can choose whatever you kind of selected. But they don't want to be in the process of like selecting everybody from the beginning. They just like want you to contact the models, get the, little portfolios of the models, and then getting them in. Are we getting like a selected version of that group of girls? If it's my own project, then obviously I'm selecting the models. And a majority of my projects that you see on YouTube are my own projects, so I'm pretty much 99% in charge of casting my own models for my videos, and they are a mix. In Bali, it's kind of a very open-ended question because a lot of the girls are assigned, but it's not like a London sign where it's just like set in stone. You can't go behind an agent's back. Not that you want to go behind the
Yeah,
agent's back, but even contacting the models directly or something is like looking at like going behind the agent's back. But in Bali, it's very relaxed. So in general, if there's any models, I either go through the agency, or because I know all the agencies, there's like 3 agencies there, and obviously I know all of them by now. So I either go to the agency and they organize it, or I ask the models directly and then just tag the agency at the end if they are agency signed. But a lot of the girls that I find through Instagram as well. So sometimes they're signed, sometimes they're not. So it all
what
depends.
if what if you are infamous, nobody knows about you? What would be your approach to find a model from an agency?
Well, I think it's a bit complex because I it was something that I was fighting for a very long time. um, you know, it took me a while to work out what I want, or how to get in touch with model agencies. Funny
Mhm.
enough, I am actually doing a whole course on how to get in touch with models or with model agencies, how to approach them, how to do your first model test, how to make it look as like simple and professional as possible, sample of posing and so on. So I will be covering that. But in short, you have to approach the agencies with a solid mood board because agencies always ask you about mood board. And if I have a word of advice, is make the mood board as simple as possible. Don't put in crazy hair, crazy makeup, crazy styling. No agency wants to see it. Agencies want to see their
Absolutely.
models shot with white tops and jeans and shiny skin against the white wall. That's all they want to see. They
True.
don't care for your
Absolutely.
fancy ideas. And the reality is, if you want to do fancy idea photo shoots, you have to build that relationship with the agency first. And then, once you take those photos, you'll be able to do your own projects. Because I did it the wrong way. I did it with the fancy styling, fancy everything, and just like no agencies were interested. And I just didn't understand why. Because obviously, coming from my background, I didn't have any like fashion photographers in my background, and my family and my friends. So I just didn't know how any of this works. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, why don't they want this crazy idea of a girl with a chandelier on her head? It's just like, well, what's happening? And at the end of the day, model tests are there for models to get simple images so they can sell their image to the clients, but they need to be like a blank canvas so the clients can see them in any particular look, rather than just having a very strong look for the image and then she's kind of boxed in that look. So
Sure.
yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think, in addition to that, just as you said, you should start this relationship. However, if you don't have any portfolio, you can simply start shooting. I'm sorry, if you don't, my mistake. your advice about having mood boards, I think it's amazing, because if you don't have a
Yeah,
portfolio, this is the way to go.
genuinely, you don't need a portfolio. I think you would be safe to say that if you approach if you write the email correctly and if you message the agency without even having any portfolio, but you just show them really good images that they want to see, they will probably give you a model. And even if
Absolutely.
they ask you for a portfolio, you can be like, listen, I don't have anything that is of substance yet, but if you're willing to just risk it and give me like a new face and just start with like the newest face, they will have someone for you. And just make sure that you do a good job. And, when you send them the models or when you send them the photos back, just make sure that you do it in timely manner. Just make sure whatever you do, it's kind of like, it's kind of like dating. You want to make a good first impression because it lasts. And it's like if you make a bad impression with an agency, they will remember it. And
True.
I was actually talking about it with on my live with Mark Klaus yesterday. I was just saying about this model or the situation I had in London where I shot with this model and she was probably the worst person I've ever worked with. I don't know if she had a really bad day, if it was really off, whichever the situation was. But she was from an agency that I've never worked with before, and I really wanted to because they had cool models. But she
Hmm.
came into the set. She was like trying to sleep in the makeup chair. She was rude. She was like disrespectful to her own agency. So at the end, I ended up taking photos for like 5 minutes. And I was like, listen, just go home. I actually don't want to shoot. I'm pretty
Yeah.
much done. But then I spoke to the agency and I'm like, listen, she had issues. She was saying all those things. She was, talking shit about you as an agency. And he's like, oh, do you have any photos? And I'm like, well, to be honest, not really, because it was just a bad vibe. And basically he was like, oh, but like you don't have any photos. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I don't, because that was the situation I just explained to you. And they literally blacklisted me and I can't work with them until today. Like if I ever email them, they just don't respond.
Oh,
But that you have situations like this and you just, it's this first impression where, here it wasn't necessarily my fault. It was just what it was. I wish it went off differently, but at the same time, you live and you learn. And a lot of the time, the impression that you make with the agency first is the one that is going to last, regardless if you can redeem yourself later on or not. They will remember
absolutely.
you. So,
Even if you do some mistakes along the way, like for example, I did the stupidest thing the other day. I was posting an image and I tagged another agency for a particular model, and it was not something that I did on purpose.
yeah,
Um, how, to be honest with you, it was just my suggestion. I have suggestions on my
yeah.
keyboard,
Oh, it
and I
happens all
made
the
the
time.
suggestion.
It
Yeah,
happens all the time.
and I know the booker wasn't particularly happy with this. And I said, I'm sorry. But to be honest with you, I realized that if this was the beginning of my relationship with this agency, it would have been very crucial.
Yeah.
However, it's not. Fortunately, it's not.
Yeah.
So hopefully things will be
That's
fine.
what I'm saying. It's just like it's kind of like, with meeting new people and stuff. It's the impression you make. And it's like if you make a good first impression, if they know you're easy to work with and you're creating good, strong images, then there is no reason for them not to give you models because they will always have girls that need tests and always have models that, and especially it depends what industry you're in, obviously in the city and stuff. But for me, when I was in Ireland, because it was a relatively small industry, like once I started getting, once I got in with the model agencies, I had no problem literally booking any of their models that were on the books. It obviously depends if you're in the bigger city and stuff, it might be a bit more difficult, but still, there's always girls. And even if you look for hashtags like model, or like let's say there's a city that you live in, let's say, I don't know, New York, let's say you type in New York model and you see girls that are there and be realistic and see the potential of certain girls, because I think sometimes a girl might not have the best portfolio up on her thing, but she could have the potential and she could be potentially a good model. So sometimes you just have to overlook certain things, especially when you're starting out, and just try your best, see maybe you can get enough, like maybe you can get a shoot done with a model like that and see if it can go somewhere, and sometimes it does. Sometimes the models that you least like, let's say, will actually produce the best images, because it's also about the relationship you have with the model on set. Because once for me personally, for example, when I do my shoots, I actually prefer to do them very closed set, where it would usually be almost like me and the model. Sometimes I don't, even if I film YouTube videos, I would literally just like put it on the tripod and that's it. Because I find having that genuine connection with the model on set makes it so much easier for her to pose, for her to relax in general. Because if you come in and you're just this like stranger,
Yeah.
especially like even later on, the bigger your portfolio is, the worse it actually gets. Because it's like, I find when I was still working in Dublin and I would have like an established book already, and some of the new faces would come in, they were literally terrified because they were like, oh my God, it's this photographer. Like my agency was like hyping me up about it, and I'm here and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm like absolutely terrified. And then, you come up to them and you start chatting to them and you just make them feel relaxed. And I would usually just like joke around on set. I would crack, jokes, like be silly, like dance to some music and stuff. Of course, there's situations, and I will say that because especially at the beginning, when I was doing that, when you're working with some girls that are especially younger, I find they don't really know how to distinguish you being friendly versus you being like an idiot
Yeah.
in a way. And they think you're an idiot, and then they start treating you like one. And that's when you're like, no, 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 wait, wait, we've made a mistake here. I'm trying to be nice and make you feel comfortable, and I'm willing to make a fool out of myself to do that. So you laugh and but there is a point where you just have to kind of establish your boundaries and be like, listen, this is a professional setup still. So it's definitely a fine art of dealing with models, but you learn, you live and you learn. You go on sets and you do stuff, and
I think you can
that's how
have a
you learn.
situation like this with everybody in your team, right? Like, for
Absolutely.
example,
Oh, yeah,
yeah, I've
absolutely.
I've been in a situation like this in London when I was with the whole team and most of the people knew me already. And there was this hairstylist who was kind of new to the set. He'd been to sets with me like once or twice. However, I knew the environment. I was really happy because it was a really friendly environment.
Hmm.
And he totally felt like he can do whatever he wants, which was it was a wrong move because it turned out that he wasted half an hour on doing something without my permission. And he was just relying on the fact that I'm really chatty, I'm very easygoing, and I'll be like, yeah, sure, whatever you like.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't the situation. I was just like, well,
Yeah.
it's not what we discussed. You have to set
No.
boundaries, just as you said.
Absolutely. And I had this situation many times before where, for example, like especially like a lot of the time hairstylists and makeup artists, they have a certain vision of the shoot, especially when you start out, and their idea could be quite a bit extreme to yours. And they will bully you, and it is kind of down to how you establish those boundaries. And I've had situations like that before with, like, for example, stylists, because stylists, especially in Ireland, they hold quite a lot of power. So there will be situations where the stylist will start like directing the model, and sometimes it's good because a lot of the time it obviously like depends on your team. Like if you are in a team of people that you really trust and you trust their vision, then sometimes somebody else directing is actually really helpful because they give you a different point of view. And that's obviously something, I'm not, I would never, like, if I'm working in a team of people, I always want us to be a team.
Of
but
course.
but sometimes it's just, if you're not a team, if you're just like a bunch of random people working together and you just happen to be in the same room, sometimes you do have to establish that, maybe if somebody has an idea, maybe you'll be like, listen, that looks great, but how about we go about it this way because it's a bit more on point. So again, it's just all about those words. Like, I would never be rude to anybody if they
Of
were,
course.
let's say, not doing what I want them to do. I would never like get upset and shout on somebody and tell them to leave. That's not my style. I will get upset afterwards and bitch to people I love, about it afterwards. But I would never say anything negative. And just like, I hate confrontation in general. So I think I'm the kind of person that if I don't like something and if I can't get along with someone, I will just never work with them again, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I
I
won't I
think
won't be
that's
like I won't be like arguing with anybody on set, or I won't be like saying anything or anything like that, because I think in general, it's such a small industry in general, and
exactly.
you don't really want people talking about you and talking about your shoots and what's happening on them and all this kind of stuff. So regardless of what's happening, you just always have to stay super professional, just smiling throughout. If you are unhappy about something, and it's like, let's say, a client shoot, you can always get the client and maybe chat to them on the side, but never call anybody out on set and all this kind of stuff. Just always carry yourself like a professional, and like you would like to be, if somebody was upset with you, it's how you would want them to deal with you, instead of calling you out in the middle of a set or something, because it's
I
just.
love this. Yeah, I think that's actually the best approach in situations like this because, as you said, the industry is very small. So, first of all, people probably talk about that, which is fine by
Yeah,
me. I don't really
yeah,
care. However, you don't know when is going to be the next time that you see this person and when you have to work with them. And sometimes
yeah,
when you're working with clients, you're not the one picking the team. So you've got to be careful with these situations. And there are also other types of moment that you have to be careful, and especially talking about setting boundaries. I think it's time to talk about breaking those boundaries. For example, like this project of yours where you shot two girls. Like, how do you have boundaries when you have to stay so close to another person? I know that right now this is a very hot topic,
yeah,
having distance. So tell
yeah.
us a bit
Well,
more about this project. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. While you're telling us about this, you guys are asking some amazing questions, and we are definitely going to go over them during this particular photo shoot.
yeah. So I think in general, when I pose or when I shoot with multiple models, I always try and cast girls that are similar height, especially because I find if you find girls that are completely different height, it's going to be very awkward for them to stand together,
Yeah.
because one of them is going to be like significantly shorter than the other, and makes the posing more difficult as well. So when I'm looking for shooting with two, three, four girls, I always make sure that they're somehow relatively the same height. So for example, for this one, both girls were actually British, which was kind of funny, because we were in Bali, but they were both British, and I don't know if they knew each other or not beforehand. But yeah, just I think in general, when I tell them what I want, again, I kind of show them a mood board of shots. So I'm like, oh, this is the kind of vibe that we're going for. When I'm directing them, I'm like, listen, it's like your best friends. You can just like lean on her shoulder. She actually had, you can see she had her hand kind of behind her waist. So it's down to it's down to how comfortable the models are. Some girls will be more comfortable than the others. As I said, I think because with them, they were kind of similar in a lot of ways in terms of like their physique and in terms of their height, and they did actually get along pretty much straight away. And they were on an I think it was like an hour and a half car ride beforehand, so they got to know each other as well, which was great. So they weren't just
Yeah,
like two
that's
random
good.
strangers showing up on set. They had like an hour and a half to bond, basically. And yeah, and that worked out great. Obviously, there's certain situations where I did like shoots with maybe two or three girls, and as I said, like I had one girl's way taller than the other two, and that would cause problems because in terms of posing, it's very tricky when one girl's like way taller than the other girls.
Always, also in beauty, it's a huge problem. Whenever you want to shoot like a
Yeah,
close up, and one has to lean the other,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
And it's the same
so
with
much
it's the same
trouble.
with fashion, and it's just it's like whenever one girl's, let's say, taller than the other, it creates problems as well, because technically, or visually straight away, whoever is shorter will just look smaller in general,
Yeah.
and it just makes it look very uneven and just very unbalanced. So usually when I shoot with two models, I always make sure that I have them like the same kind of like build and somehow similar. Sometimes I would go for like the opposite. So let's say having a blonde and a brunette, or having light skin, dark skin. But still, I think the height is the most important factor. Nothing else really matters that much. But it's just as long as they're pretty much similar height, then you're good. And yeah, in general, I just think in terms of directing, you just have to tell them, listen, it's like like your best friends. You're super comfortable, you're just hanging out, you're just having time of your life. Just a lot of the time I actually tell them to just chat between each other, so they're not even looking at each other. There was
Yeah.
actually another shot there, it's just not in the folder, where they were like walking up and down on the beach. So it's just any movement that you can incorporate into the shoot as well always helps, because it kind of breaks them out of the comfort zone and just makes them like move around a bit more, which is definitely helpful.
Do you think that we should choose models that have similar facial?
Features.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, in general, I think girls that look similar, kind of like they could be siblings,
Hmm.
usually work pretty well. But to be honest, at the same time, as I said, like, girls that look completely different can look very nice as well, because it's like a nice contrast between them. So it all depends on your idea and what you want. This one was particularly interesting because they genuinely really did look like sisters, which was kind of funny. But at the same time, yeah, it all depends, because if like, if one of them was, let's say, that's another thing, like if one of them happened to be like really pale and the other one was really tanned, then you'd have to consider the differences, because for swimwear, I do usually go for girls that are a bit more tanned. Even if like I love shooting swimmer and black girls as well, because their skin looks so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just so like glistening, especially with the oil. So like usually the darker the skin, the nicer the swimmer looks. So yeah, I usually wouldn't necessarily cast like girls that are maybe super pale for swimwear. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's lots of girls that are pale. It's just particularly because I use so much body oil, it just looks a bit better. Yeah, I'm the same. I'm just like I can sit in the sun for like 7 hours and I'll be just like as white as I was before the 7 hours. So
Let's take a look at the comments, because people were waiting for like
yeah,
7 hours for me to ask you
that's
some
okay.
questions. So, and let's see. Joanna is asking, okay, so we asked you who's choosing the models. Melaki is saying, how long did it take you to learn how to retouch?
I would say I still haven't learned properly. Well, it was a long process. I don't remember exactly, to be honest. I've retouched my work from the very beginning. I think the last year I've been using retouchers just because I find it way more convenient. I started to shift towards professional retouchers when I started shooting more beauty, because I find with beauty I am lacking the patience, if anything, to just do the 3 hours of Photoshop. I just
We
find it very daunting, and I just don't really enjoy it. Like, I've spoken to so many people who love retouching, like photographers. They're like, "Oh, I love retouching. I just find it so soothing. It's like yoga," and I'm like, for me, it's like yoga in hell. I hate it. It's just like it's like mental yoga in hell. Like you're on fire and you don't want to be there. So for me, I would rather just spend that time planning shoots and just doing photo shoots in general, and planning photo shoots instead of doing the editing. But I think, it depends. It depends how long you do it for. Like if you're training regularly, if you do it like every day, if you like, there's so many elements to it. But I think if you, especially nowadays, if you watch tutorials on YouTube on how to do certain things, it's so much easier. I think it's definitely not as hard
I,
as it was back in the day.
as far as I remember, in our podcast together, we are diving very deep into this conversation, how you found your retouching artist, why exactly. So, guys, you can definitely listen to it. Here is the link to the podcast, and I can also just post it in the comments for you to be easier. Okay, so here you go, guys. This is where you can listen to all of the podcasts that we've done together. And there is another question coming from Nicola Dechkov. I said this
Mhm.
in my native tongue. Okay. How do you mostly go about your shooting process? Are you more of a single shooter, or shooting continuous several FPS, or sorry, in order to capture movement you could have
Could have
otherwise missed?
otherwise missed. So when it comes to, yeah, I take single shots. I don't like. I take a lot of single shots.
Me too.
Um,
Yeah.
I each shoot I probably shoot anything between like 600 and 800 images, sometimes even more, depending, because I like to go around the model and I like to see, because sometimes it's hard to see at the back of your camera what exactly you're shooting. And I never tether on location because when you're in the sand, then it's just a whole another story.
Or
So I usually just try and go on different angles and just like switch around the model and just see how the model looks in different angles and different lighting setups and so on. If I do shoot some like high movement setups where let's say the model is jumping or there's like waving of the dress, if I shoot fashion and so on, then yes, I might do continuous frames per second and so on. But in general, I think it's just more like single shooting, but just doing a lot of it basically.
I love this. Okay, so I do exactly the same thing. So
Yeah.
cannot add anything there. I can see that on Instagram we've been tagged by Annie Waltz here. So thank you so much for this. I'm really happy that you're enjoying the live stream. Zoltan Vaz is here and he's actually having a question. How often do you use similar skin color tones? I mean, to retouch the color grading.
So for those of you who don't know, I have my own presets. So I do a lot of the time use presets and I do all my color grading in Lightroom. I don't really use Photoshop unless it's for skin retouching. I do have a set of colors that I usually go for in my skin. I definitely have favorites. I do always go for like very deep golden tones, and that's kind of majority of my work. So yeah, like that's how a lot of the time if I have my presets, so as you see, like the tones are like really deep. I use quite a lot of body oil as well, so I have those natural highlights. And then any of those, I actually released like new packs as well where I had like an upgrade because obviously my style has been changing and so on. But sometimes a lot of the time I will just take the presets that I made and obviously adjust it accordingly to the photo because it depends on the light and on the setup in general. But I do definitely have a certain tone for my work. There's like if you look at my Instagram, you'll see that my colors are pretty consistent when it comes to skin. It's just like the certain tone that I really like. Yeah, so I have this like it's like this. It's like it's very brown in there. That's for sure.
Well,
So it's
your
just like
place is Bali, so I think
yeah,
that's
and it's
very,
just
very normal.
and I think it's